instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Intérpretes que ya están listos, si me haces el favor. Pero vamos a terminar con la lista para verificar quórum. Paraguay, buenos días.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the CTOUR, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us. Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. Muy buenos dias. Honorable Minister Jaime Persic, Minister of Education of Argentina, and Chair of the Inter-American Committee of Education, Honorable Ministers of Education and Heads of Delegations of OAS member states, His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Ambassador Yolan Smith, Permanent Representative of Grenada to the Organization of American States and Chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, distinguished ambassadors and permanent representatives to the OAS, distinguished permanent observers to the Organization of American States, representatives of international organizations, other specially invited guests, OAS colleagues, good morning. Muy buenos dias. On behalf of the Organization of American States, I am deeply honored to welcome you to the 9th meeting of the Inter-American Ministers of Education, convened under the theme towards building a new educational hemispheric pact in the context of change. My name is Kim Osborne, and I'm the Executive Secretary for Integral Development of the Organization of American States. To begin our proceedings this morning, I'm pleased to offer the floor to our Secretary General, His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the OAS, to offer welcome remarks. Señor Secretario, tiene usted.
As a region, we have to be more effective in our fight against poverty, generate more wealth. People cannot move forward just by redistributing misery. To do this successfully, we have to provide more and better education for everyone. We welcome the Inter-American meeting of Ministers of Education. We greet the Minister of Education of Argentina and Jaime Persic, and Chief Submission of the OAS. Sustainable education is a state policy. There needs to be more effective reform to ensure equal opportunity for children, and that the only way to do that is through education. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, the region in education faced challenges, inequalities, and the pandemic only laid bare greater shortcomings in education. According to a UNESCO report this year, in-person, the shutting down of in-person schooling had a deleterious effect on education. Led to teenage pregnancy, more domestic violence. We know today that schools in our hemisphere were the ones that were closed down for the longest time, which just broadened inequality gaps. And so we celebrate that the Inter-American education agenda should consolidate its mission to build on our current reality. These guidelines represent a consensus that Ministers of Education arrived at on urgent and necessary reforms affecting the region and the current situation that jeopardizes education. This pact will guide our efforts over the next 5 years. Jaime Persic, Minister of Education in Argentina for the 2021-2024, assumed the commitment to collaborate with us to build an Inter-American Agenda 2022-2027, following through on the work that was done by the prior chair. This 11th meeting of Ministers of Education, we know that an open dialogue is a reality. To follow through on this ongoing dialogue, to put public policies in effect is one of the biggest challenges. To arrive at a consensus on how to recover, repair, and to activate education after the pandemic, making use of new technologies in teacher training and in teaching. And we just mentioned climate change as being one of the topics that have been identified. Education in the region is at a turning point. We need to imagine a better future for schools, promoting different approaches, adapting to change, just as is called for in the Inter-American Agenda. This ministerial effort has taken us a cross-sectoral approach between ministers of education and of health for the period 2022-2027. This collaboration with other sectors will continue moving forward in a sustainable way from multiple angles. Specialists from ministries of education and health over the years have concluded that it's necessary for there to be a comprehensive and sustainable approach to promoting equity in schools, especially for the most vulnerable populations. After COVID-19, with the resumption of in-person teaching at schools, it's also become evident that physical activity is also more important, and so this is a joint effort between PAHO and OAS. We've launched the Inter-American program on healthy nutrition programs and physical activity in schools. This is a program that supports countries in putting together national plans, facilitating the implementation of effective experiences. On the other hand, in 2021, ministers of labor and education came together to work on developing this agenda and doing away with child labor. This is only one of the topics that describe the huge effort that we still have to undertake, and we have to do this in such a way that it's measurable. There are great needs in education and limited resources. This calls for effective governance, and we have to find synergies, making it possible for us to come up with common goals, to also propose that education always be viewed as a right. We can't have double standards. I hope for you the best of success in this meeting so we can garner results to move forward in this context of change. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you for your continued support for our work within the context of the Secretariat for Integral Development. It is now my pleasure to offer the floor to Her Excellency Yolande Smith, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Grenada to the OAS and Chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development. Ambassador Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary. I trust I'm being heard clearly. Yes. The Honorable Jaime Pasek, Minister of Education of Argentina, Honorable Ministers of Education and Heads of Delegation, Secretary General of the OAS, Dr. Luis Almagro, Executive Secretary for Integral Development, Kim Osborne, distinguished representatives of member states, representatives of permanent observers and international organizations, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, CD, I am pleased to welcome you to the 11th meeting of Ministers of Education. The theme of this ministerial, towards building a new educational hemispheric pact in the context of change, has at its core our need for transformation, remaining mindful of the obligations to achieve SDG 4, which focuses on inclusive and equitable quality education and the promotion of lifelong learning opportunities for all. We are all aware that COVID-19 pandemic has stymied our efforts towards the achievement of this goal and many other sustainable development goals, but we must nevertheless strengthen our resolve in our march towards this attainment. At the Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education in 2019, our focus was on building sustainable partnerships through cooperation with a renewed focus on education and skills for better citizenry. While much progress has been made in this regard, there is still much work to be done. I therefore anticipate that this ministerial meeting will contribute to build upon or continue to build upon the robust policy dialogue that has taken place in the past 3 years and maintain the process of collaboration based on our shared desire for changing the trajectory of our region. As chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, I am pleased to report that the Council has benefited from dialogue with educational leaders from across the hemisphere. In May 2021, the issue of the Hemispheric Action Plan for the Continuity of Education was discussed in the CD, with a view to facilitating stronger synergies with global, hemispheric, and sub-regional educational initiatives in response to the challenges presented by COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, a panel was convened including pertinent education focal points from UNESCO Regional Bureau for Education in Latin America and the Caribbean, Human Resource Development at the CARICOM Secretariat, and the Secretary of the Council of Ministers of Education and Culture of SICA. Other national experiences were shared by representatives of the Ministries of Education of Costa Rica and Colombia. More recently, in April 2022, the CD provided an opportunity for reflection on shared challenges affecting the region in terms of educational continuity. Special focus was placed on populations in vulnerable conditions and initiatives taken by governments to face the COVID-19 pandemic. It highlighted the approaches taken to construct a new hemispheric educational pact in the context of change in a post-pandemic educational recovery and repair process. Distinguished delegates, I am confident that the decisions taken over the next 2 days will strengthen our collective abilities towards the attainment of our commitments espoused in the Declaration and Plan of Action. I further pledge the support of the CD towards the furtherance of the objectives of this ministerial meeting. In closing, I want to again thank the government of Argentina as chair of the Inter-American Committee on Education for its leadership of the Inter-American Education Agenda 2022 to 2027 and its facilitation of strong policy dialogue in our region. I thank all member states for taking time to participate in this dialogue on what may be considered the most critical sector in the development of our region. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It is now my distinct pleasure to offer the floor to the Honorable Jaime Persec, Minister of Education of Argentina. Minister, thank you so much for your leadership of this process. Thank you so much for bringing us to this point. And the Honorable Minister, the floor is now yours.
Good afternoon. I would like to greet all of you, ladies and gentlemen, the OAS, and all the ministers of education of this very diverse and large American region. The path we've come down to hold this meeting has been very long, and we have made progress, and we have agreed to and validated the documents that we will approve tomorrow. In all these different meetings, we've had the opportunity to define thematic lines and to arrive at consensuses regarding the priorities that are to guide our actions to achieve the objectives we set up for ourselves in the Inter-American educational agenda through 2027. However, the actions that we're going to carry out, without a doubt, are going to rise to the challenges that the pandemic posed, as well as the unfairness in our educational systems before the pandemic, so that we can create a positive trajectory for children and young people. This situation calls for decisions and urgent transformation. A number of different fora have been held in which declarations have been made in which underscore the need for there to be an educational agenda that recovers a central focus that corresponds with the role of education in the full exercise of all other economic, cultural, social rights. Is also for us to achieve social justice and sustainable development for our societies, countries, our region, and our continent. That's why the transformation of educational systems, the call for states that ensure the budget be made available to carry out active policies with a systemic approach that addresses the multiple challenges that a very complex educational landscape presents us, and to bring schools back in to the fold, to ensure good coverage, to enhance the learning, to increase hours in the classroom, to improve scholarships, to broaden the articulation of schools with the community and the participation of families, as well as tie education and education for young people with the world of work. There has to be an intersectoral approach to coordinate actions that make the right of education of quality education be translated into something effective for everyone on our continent. Young people, as well as teachers, are the key actors to lead this recovery, the repair that the educational system requires. We recognize the importance of ensuring their participation in decision-making to carry out this transformation, for them to take part and express their voice in creating democratic societies that reflect needs, priorities, and the interests of our country's peoples. School needs to be a part of broadening of people's rights, to deepen the thought process and the learning to build democratic societies and peaceful coexistence, strengthening ties across diversities. We should celebrate diversity because that is a part of our life together, common life. Education that offers us personal development opportunities, also in the workplace and community, for us to live in a world that we all share. In this context, in which we feel the need for a transformation and to change, it's necessary for us to build a new educational pact for our hemisphere, offering our countries the opportunity to have the necessary tools to rethink, reimagine, rebuild our educational systems, unleashing concrete actions that would undertake specific reforms, meeting specific needs of our peoples and our countries. Thank you very much.
Minister Persik, for your remarks, and this brings us to the close of the opening ceremony. I would like to thank His Excellency Luis Almagro, Excellency Yolande Smith, Chair of CD, and Minister Persik for joining us for this session. We will now move to the first plenary. Before doing so, though, I'd like to acknowledge that we are operating virtually, and we kindly ask delegations that if you're not going to be present, please have someone in your seat to ensure that we always have quorum for the meeting. And should the minister need to leave the room, the first in the order of precedence, which is the Minister of Suriname, will take the floor. Thank you so much. And now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the floor our temporary chair, the Minister of Suriname, Minister Marie Levens. Minister Levens, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ministers of Education and heads of delegations, Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Mr. Assistant Secretary General, distinguished representatives of member states, representatives of permanent observer countries to the organization, representatives of international organizations, Mrs. Kim Osborne, Executive Secretary for Integral Development, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to commence this first plenary session of the 11th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education, held in the framework of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development of the Organization of American States. And in doing so, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to all member states for kindly bestowed on me this honor. Last time I addressed the meeting of Ministers of Education was 7 years ago in February 2015 at the 8th meeting of Ministers of Education in Panama. At that time, we were making the first steps of what later became a reality, the Inter-American Education Agenda. The universe has its own ways to make things happen, and I am pleased to be back to enjoy and see the progress we have made since then. As this meeting takes shape, I would be honored to share later during upcoming sessions some thoughts that might be relevant for our work ahead. We arrived today to this forum after a robust process of consensus building and open policy dialogue. And we are facing a situation we have never endured before. We now have a big and renewed responsibility to assertively respond to the needs our educational systems are facing after being hit by the impact of the pandemic. Colleagues, our time, this time, calls for collective approach. We have to focus on serving especially those who are falling out of our educational systems. Let's show why and how the OAS lives by its motto of cooperation in solidarity. We cannot just act without reflection. We must reflect so we can act in solidarity, integrating all voices, all visions, and all perspectives. The world has changed. We have changed. Our schools have changed. There is no other way to adapt and respond to this context of change. I said the same yesterday when I opened the meeting of the OAS Teachers Network item, who deserves our support. It now falls to us to elect the chair of this meeting. To proceed with the election, I am pleased to offer the floor to delegations who wishes to nominate candidates for the position of chairs. I do hope
Minister Brown of Ecuador is requesting the floor.
Minister of Ecuador.
Good morning to each and every one of you. The delegation of Ecuador would like to nominate Argentina, Jaime Persic, to be the chair. The sound is cutting in and out.
No sé si es que me parece que se entrecortó un poco, pero lo que está.
I think there was poor sound, but what we're doing is we're nominating Jaime Persic to chair this meeting. Thank you very much.
Chile is requesting the floor.
Madam Chair, can you hear me okay? Great. Chile has asked for the floor to second the nomination by Ecuador, and we request that Argentina be approved by acclamation.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. The chair has been. Let me ask first if there is no objection. If there is no objection, then we have chosen the chair by acclamation. You know, when we were physically available, then we give an applause. I don't know what you want to do, but that's what we normally do if the chair is chosen. Thank you very much. Mr. Jaime Persic, Minister of... thank you very much. Minister Jaime Persic, Minister of Education of Argentina, allow me to extend to you, on behalf of myself and the delegations here today, our sincere congratulations on your election as chair of this 11th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education. I wish you all success in this undertaking, and I'm very pleased to invite you to lead our deliberations. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Greetings to all the ministers and heads of delegations and all the officials, OAS officials, that is. Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Yolande Von Smit, Permanent Representative of Grenada to the OAS and Chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, distinguished representatives of the member states, representatives of the permanent observer countries to the OAS, representatives of the international organizations, Ms. Kim Osborne, Executive Secretary for Integral Development, and special guests, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, we're very grateful for being elected, and it's an honor for my country, and we accept the responsibility to chair this meeting as a country. Well, this is the major forum for hemispheric dialogue and for formulating policies on education in the Americas, our hemisphere. So thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the draft approval of the draft order of business. The document that was distributed as document was considered during the preparatory meeting, which was held on July 28th in the Inter-American Council for Integral Development city itself. In introducing this draft order of business for its consideration, I propose including a procedural issue. That the theme of the presentation of as an item number 2, the technical secretary's report and follow-up on the 10th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education. I would like to give the floor to any delegations who would like to take the floor at this time to comment on this slight tweak, adding an item 2 to this order of business. Since there is no comments, no request for the floor, I propose that this change is hereby approved. It is hereby approved by acclamation. It's hereby approved. Is that okay? Yes, okay. Now, draft schedule. Let's move on to consider the draft calendar, a document that sets out all the things we do at this meeting. You all have document 3, revision 2. I submit to your consideration this draft schedule to all delegations. If there are no comments, it is hereby approved. Now, we should now discuss some procedural issues and ratify the agreements that were reached during the preparatory meeting for this minister meeting. And with regard to Article 21 of the Rules of Procedure for sectoral meetings as follows. Building Article 23 of the Rules of Procedure establishes that at every meeting there should be a style committee that's made up of 4 delegations that represent respectively each one of the official languages of the organization. We shall now proceed to choose the style committee of the 11th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education. So Brazil will be for Portuguese, Canada for French, Costa Rica for Spanish, and Belize for English. If there's no objections, it is hereby approved. The members of the Style Committee. Approved. So, appointment of committees and working groups with relation to the chair understands there's no need that during this ministerial meeting that there be any side meetings. And so therefore, as was agreed at the preparatory meeting, we will not create any subordinate bodies. It's important to clarify that the committees and working groups that are mentioned in the rules of procedure are not the working group of the Inter-American Committee on Education that will be established in and another item of the order of business that we just, or it was established before. If there's no comments, it's hereby approved. Now, agreement on the deadline for proposals so that there's time for the Secretariat to translate and distribute documents. I suggest agreeing on whether the delegations have any proposals that should be presented to the Secretariat no later than 12 noon today, November 10th, 2022. If there's no objection, it is hereby agreed. Duration of the meeting. In accordance with the schedule we've approved at the 11th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education, it will conclude on Friday, November 11th, 2022 at 1 p.m. And now that agreements have been adopted with regard to procedural issues and statutory issues, let's move on to item 2 of this meeting, and we will listen to the report. The Technical Secretariat have been following up the 10th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education. For the presentation of the report, I'm pleased to offer the floor to the Director of the Department of Human Development, Education, and Employment of the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development, Mr. Jesus Shulcri Giocoman Zapata. Director, you have the floor for your presentation at this time. Thank you very much, Minister. And if the presentation could be put up on the screen, I ask for the support of the team for this report of the Technical Secretariat in follow-up to the mandates of the 10th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education. Minister Jaime Percy, Ministers of Education, Chiefs of Delegation, and other members, and Ambassador Smith, the chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, Secretary Kim Asmer, Executive Secretary for Integral Development. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to present to you the report of the Technical Secretariat to this ministerial meeting. Next, I'm going to begin by saying that in response to the COVID-19, a few days after it was declared, the Secretariat provided a virtual space with a virtual space for and videos to look as and a space that was devoted to exchange of official actions from the ministries of education that have been taken to promote education in this situation. The report is divided into 3 sections: the hemispheric plan for the continuity of education, intersectoral collaboration, and then program activities of SETI. All of these actions were a baseline for systematically arranging programs, lessons learned, and experiences that contribute to define the 2022-2027 Inter-American Education Agenda. Next, the Hemispheric Plan of Action for the Continuity of Education, which is known as FACE, and by its acronym in Spanish, is, shall we say, is the document that, with the approval as part of the work plan of the Inter-American Committee 2022 in 2020. The work of the CIE is the result of, it's become the first sector that's attempted to respond to the COVID-19 as through an instrument of dialogue. It became an efficient tool to adjust activities and incorporate additional actions. All of this for the purpose of ensuring continuity of education. This unique process enabled peers and officials to respond immediately to the different countries. There were specific requests for support through FACE. The first one was building these education systems, and this set the pace for new developments in education in the post-pandemic year. One request was the creation of an agreement or an atmospheric impact on education that involves society, private sector, civil society. This request is a continuation of an open political dialogue. Another request was a dialogue of an exchange of experiences in the context of COVID, which was organized under the leadership of Colombia. This activity emerged as a need to adapt curricular structures to ensure continuity of education services in the home. Then we organized an exchange about returning to in-person classes led by Ecuador. This activity included high-level officials and technical officials in the context of COVID-19, and it had to do with teaching policies and educational research. This exchange identified important challenges, including access to internet in rural areas, access to technology. High percentages of students needed this connectivity, and also to ensure continuity of education. Also, we opened up digital access to educational experiences during the pandemic for persons with disability. This activity was led by Costa Rica in collaboration with Argentina and Colombia. There was participation of high-level officials, education officials, and it led to an exchange of ideas with the voice of actual students and persons with disability. Recently, there were 2 dialogues on school engagement. These exchanges enabled review of local experience to prevent risks. The recommendations have set the pace to strengthen right to education in school settings and prepares for a post-pandemic setting. Now I move on to the next part of this report, which is intersectoral collaboration between education sectors, health and labor, which is since 2015 has been there was a workshop that was held about this collaboration. This activity was under the leadership of Chile with the support of the International Labor Organization, and enabled better understanding of the challenges with regard to the transformation of the work world and in education and training. As a result, it was suggested several actions regionally, working towards equivalencies between nations, and also a pilot program for mobilization of students throughout the region. Also, it underscored the cooperation agreement of the OAS and Internet Society, and an integral development project was launched, which included virtual courses, tools, and resources for more than 200 people who are responsible for this area and ministries of labor to help understand basic principles of internet and governance thereof and security on internet. I'd like to finish the second part with regard to the intersectoral dialogue. To put into effect these practices is the essence of our work. So the Inter-American Committee on Education took part, therefore, in actions to prevent non-transmittable diseases in the Americas, and it was led by the Pan American Health Organization. As a result, after 2 years, I am pleased to report that on October 12th, we officially launched the Inter-American Program on healthy eating and physical activity program. This Inter-American program is based on 3 planks: development of capacity building and technical support. This is reflected in visits by the input of the states during the dialogue between ministers of education and ministers of health of the different countries. Next slide. All of these actions that I'm reporting are the baseline for systematizing lessons learned and experiences to create this the 2022-2027 Inter-American Education Agenda that we have completed. The governments have identified the challenges and the issues in which transformation of education will focus on in these times of change, in these contexts of change. This has been reflected in the draft declaration and the plan that will be signed at this virtual meeting, and this will be our guide to uphold the right to education in the Americas. And then I'm going to talk about programmatic activities of CIE. With regard to human development and employment, we've had activities in 4 areas that have to do with this Inter-American Education Agenda. The activities are in line with the priorities set by the member states, and we work in collaboration with key partners to carry out these programs. This week, on the 18th of November, the Inter-American Network of Teaching Teachers organized its virtual seminar on quality teachers. There was a design of policies, practices, and programs to train teachers throughout the Americas. It offered an opportunity for different associated institutions to show their initiatives for teaching educators. As background to this, at the 6th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education, there was created this Inter-American body, and what was set, and this network was established, and so this contributed to achieving the Inter-American goals, providing technical assistance and exchange of experiences between states. Over 17 years, the network has supported more than 2,000 some odd teachers, and 4 million some odd students have been helped by this. Thanks to the support of the OAS member states, this has been a reality. Particularly, the U.S. mission has been very generous with $7 million to finance activities of this network over the last 10 years. Dariel, in collaboration with the Americas Portal, has provided technological teams to 92 primary schools in the Caribbean, and has trained more than 66,000 some odd teachers in the use of technology. In the framework of this collaboration, there were 4,000 scholarships were given to teachers in Peru with regard to learning in a virtual setting. Also, we've sought better collaboration in education between governments and civil society organizations. Thus far, more than 80 civil society organizations have taken part in our activities. These activities have led to 2 studies. First, organizations in civil society have made contributions to education in the scenario of the pandemic, where 68 organizations from 16 countries took part. Secondly, the post-pandemic reconstruction progressively in school settings with 30 some odd organizations from several different countries. And best practices were exchanged, and new technologies that are implemented since the beginning of the pandemic. This activity aims to contribute to disseminating actions that have been taken by the schools in the Americas to help children and adolescents and children. This includes 170 best practices from 17 countries through scholarship and training programs of the OAS. With the support of the countries of Chile, Mexico, and Brazil, we've granted more than 3,000 scholarships from 24. 90 some odd % of these scholarships were for online, and 44% have been for women, and the rest were for men. Through the partnerships, we have key efforts with Spain and another university here in the United States, and more than 12,000 scholarships were granted. In addition to the professional development scholarships, 7 short courses between March and June in 2023 will be held with regard to disaster recovery and development in rural areas. The academic scholarship program received application from many countries for 22. 6 offers for undergrad and others for postgrad, and they receive a significant amount of money each year as a complement to the scholarships through the Pan American Leo Ro Fund. There's no interest loans provided as well, and members of the OAS have been refining these studies. That is, students from member states have been able to refine their studies with these. I'd like to wrap up by thanking Antigua and Barbuda, who has been the chair before Argentina, Barbados, Costa Rica, and Colombia, as active members of the working groups for this period, and whose leadership was essential to be able to achieve these results. So we also recognize the leadership for 2021-2025 of Argentina as chair of the Inter-American Committee on Education, and Ecuador as vice chair thereof, and we hope to be able to continue to work together. We look forward to it. The Secretariat also has expressed the PAHO and other international organizations to aid in these efforts. The Technical Secretariat and the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development of the OAS reaffirms its commitment to cooperation, which are we have urgent tools to be able to attain this resilience. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Muchas gracias, señor director.
Thank you, Director, for the report you've presented. It provides a holistic and comprehensive view about collaborative work and generation of consensus that have come about over the last 3 years, particularly in the face of the unthinkable challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Allow me to express, as chair of the CIE and on behalf of my colleagues, our gratitude for the work you've conducted in the Technical Secretariat and your team and the other officials for the support and response you've offered to our countries in seeking to ensure education continuity in our region. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask if any delegation would like to make reference to the report at this time. Thank you very much. Since there's no other request for the floor, I propose that the meeting take note of the report of the Secretariat about the activities conducted in holding the 10th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education in July 2019. If there's no objection, it's hereby approved. Next, colleagues, let's move on. Begin the second plenary session. I apologize. We have a request for the floor from the United States at this time. U.S.
United States, you have the floor. Please turn on your mic and camera. Thank you. Your mic is muted, sir.
Chair, I believe the U.S. was requesting for the next plenary. I don't think it was in response to this. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. Great. We had agreed to incorporate the report. And let us begin now with item 3, towards building a new education hemisphere compact in the context of change. And so Vice President and myself would like to open dialogue on what we've done through dialogue thus far in the region, which and we would like to lay out the road ahead of us. We have to, on the basis of respect, capacity to listen in view of the fact that our schools, our students and families with our teachers and the entire community in a context worldwide where we are revisiting positions, approaches, and styles of response to make the most of this space of open dialogue that is deep, and this is key in Latin America. We recognize education as a fundamental right and as an undelegable responsibility, which puts communities in the center of teaching and learning. We reaffirm the imperial nature of education that has to be linked to inclusion and well-being of students. Education in the region is facing a great complexity with regard to the perspective, its outlook and development. We have a global crisis of education that can have affect education for an entire generation. We have to have urgent transformation to move on to transformational action. We require the leading roles played by states and active and effective participation of civil society and effective inclusion in debate of and in our country. Our commitment to education is not just institutionalized in laws, but it's also backed by regulations which safeguards and ensures education funding on an ongoing basis for development of national education policies. This allows us to we have 14 years of mandatory education from 4 years of age up through secondary school, as well as that it's free education from the beginning up until high school and state institution. These elements are what are fundamental for including and development of our children. However, there still exists gaps that we have to overcome to have full participation and broaden this right for all of the population. We have to work as well to overcome injustice and inequities that continue to loom over many of our students for different reasons. Indigenous people, Afro-descendants, persons with disabilities, among others, a lot have limited possibilities to graduate from the education system. And so therefore, as I mentioned in my first remarks, the Hemispheric Compact will be a roadmap to confront the challenges such as this inequality gap and the deficit of education that affect our communities and appeal to our educations. This requires a commitment and active participation of all of us, and we disseminate the focal points from the ministries throughout the region, a dynamic so that we can move forward in the priority areas under this compact.
Dos grupos de trabajo. Uno que aborde
a systemic approach to build educational systems which are resilient, and others, the intersectoral agenda. Both groups collaborate closely with the CIE authorities and Technical Secretariat to offer a frame of reference that feeds back into trends, progress, and decisions made and defined in the 2022-2025 Plan of Action to implement concrete actions, which will be in furtherance of mandates approved at this meeting. Our commitment will be to promote interaction and intersectoral interaction between health and labor and other actors at the multilateral level, civil society, for them to also contribute their experience, resources, and platforms with which we can broaden the reach of our initiatives. All of this work will make it possible for there to be participation and collaboration of all of the member countries. Next, it's a pleasure for me to give the floor to my dear friend and colleague, Ms. Maria Brown Perez, Minister of Education of Ecuador and Vice Chair of the Inter-American Commission of Education. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister and Chair. warm welcome to all the OAS authorities, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, chiefs of delegation, and all the member states and teams of the member states with us today. Now, as we've just heard about different aspects and challenges of educational sectors toward building a new pact in context of change to ensure quality education, and we place a stress on transformation, which is to guide the agenda in education in the hemisphere. This year, 2022, we have generated within this venue of cooperation a consensus and documents to be adopted for the work of the Inter-American Commission on Education, Committee on Education, the Inter-American Agenda through 2027, the Hemispheric Declaration on Education, the Hemispheric Plan of Action on Education. Other important matters were agreed to, such as the different working groups and committees that will make it possible for all of this to become reality. 2 years have transpired since the educational systems of our region underwent this deep crisis, mostly given the shutdown of schools owing to COVID-19, leading to an increase in educational inequalities and causing untold loss in learning and the well-being of our students throughout the region. Even though the devastating impact of this crisis is nothing new, it did give rise to an immediate response by our educational systems. We continue to be encouraged to rethink, reimagine a new future for boys, girls, adolescents in our region, a promise that brings us all here together here today, driving our action. I don't want to overlook the effort put forward by each one of the countries in tackling this crisis and the progress made in the area of digitizing the educational media and reinvesting in programs that have shifted toward topics that had been set aside, such as basic, foundational, knowledge cycle, emotional, psychosocial aspects of education, all of which have taken on greater importance in our national and regional debates. So it's necessary for us to underscore that the challenges that we continue to face in societies such as those of Latin America, in which we have large inequalities, we need to join efforts to undertake actions with the spirit of solidarity. According to a World Bank report and that of UNESCO, there is a slight increase in the unschooled population up through 14 years of age and a high risk of school dropout for the 2022-2023 period, and the fallout of that is sweeping, overwhelming, especially if you talk about the emotional well-being of everyone involved in education, not just the students, but also teachers, school authorities, families, the whole educational community. On the other hand, we also face new challenges such as the migratory crisis, the human movements we've seen in this region that we continue to see, and societies' distrust in democracy in our societies. That's why we need to turn toward this effort to transform education as a means of, to be an engine of creating sustainable democracies, with the understanding that schools should be the last institution to shut down no matter what, and they should be the first to open up again, so that education always be viewed as a basic human right. Therefore, to have an educational agenda that is common for all of the countries of the Americas is a step toward recovery beyond concrete cases and how we've individually tackled challenges. We need to share and enrich everyone through an exchange of our own experiences. This is what we call toward the building of a new hemispheric pact in a context of change, to ensure that this translates into concrete actions, and that's why we have the plan of action that has already been mentioned, that was worked on with the consensus of all the countries in the technical areas of the OAS, with two keys also mentioned by the minister. First, a systemic approach to build resilient educational systems, which will seek to repair and reactivate schools, including professional personal development, to train new teachers and school leaders, an educational agenda, and to offer special attention to persons with disabilities, social emotional development, and harmonic and peaceful coexistence, integrating technologies to consolidate an agenda that is sustainable and inclusive. That is very important. First pillar of this effort. The second is the intersectoral agenda, which shall bolster its work in the following way: educational mobility for national integration, education and work, and to promote healthy school environments. Without a doubt, education has not gone back to being what it was. However, what we have learned from the pandemic can enable us to move toward new structures, to rethink a new educational model. I hope that at the end of these 2 days of work, we can have a new hemispheric pact, enabling us to go beyond individual responses and to come up with a platform of tools and ideas for us to collectively tackle adversity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Minister. Maria. The floor is open for any remarks. Now we move on to the third plenary session, which will address the fourth topic, a systemic focus to build resilient educational systems. You may recall in the different dialogues on public policy and programmatic actions developed within the framework of the activities of the Work Plan 2019-2022 of the Inter-American Committee of Education, and in the midst of the health crisis, which led to mass shutdown of schools, and we took on the commitment that education be a right that the state cannot sidestep. To that effect, a framework of action needs to be created to ensure continuity of education at different levels of education, promoting the care and attention for those most hard hit by circumstances, coming up with a strategy based on analysis and the reality of actions taken by governments, and to build in multiple perspectives to move forward toward building a new hemispheric educational pact in a context of change based on regional collaboration, enabling us to rethink, reimagine educational systems that are resilient and with effective responses in a context of change. New concerns arose in this approach regarding recovering, repairing, reactivating the educational sector after the pandemic, making use of new technologies for education and the digital education, teacher training, research agendas at the regional national level, and also offering attention for the socio-emotional care of students and teachers. I would like to thank my colleagues, Ministers of Education of El Salvador, Chile, United States, and Paraguay for sharing their outlook, their approaches, and experiences. Each one will have 10 minutes with which to kick off our talks, and then there will be time for comments and contributions by other delegations. Once they conclude their remarks, I would invite you to set your notes aside and for us to simply engage in an open, rich, deep discussion which will help us define next steps. And I would join other delegations to engage in this dialogue. Minister of Education of Chile, Minister Marco Avila, has the floor. Now, for all the ministers of education and the delegations of Latin America, the Caribbean, Canada, and the US, I would like to thank you for this venue. I'm not in my office in Santiago, but in Valparaiso. I'm looking over the Pacific, which is right in front of me, and I see the sun, and I offer a very warm welcome to all of you. Now, the first thing that I would like to do is to talk about the crisis and how all of the educational systems of the world are addressing and trying to overcome it. This in the spirit of sharing experiences. The pandemic laid bare inequalities, broadened gaps that existed before, gender inequality, the need for there to be a transformation, and the fact that there are changes in the labor market also necessitates changes in education, all stemming from the pandemic. So these are all big challenges for the educational systems, schools, educational centers, which are the places not only where we learn school curricula, but where we learn how to get along with people, overcome conflicts through dialogue. This challenge wasn't only spurred by the pandemic. Now we have gotten together in different meetings in which we have considered how we can address these challenges. Countries will do better if they don't act alone, so we can devise practices together, undertake collective actions. The effects on mental health, it seems that that's something that's going to be addressed in the educational systems as well. So that has turned our focus to people's and students' well-being in the community as well. Chile, unfortunately, was one of the countries whose schools were closed for the longest time, and that the effects of that can be seen in the level of education resulting from that shutdown, and the socialization role of school was also undermined. It's so important for there to be integral development. We've also seen that the pandemic has created opportunities which invite us to rethink our education. So I do think it is important at this meeting for us to put our heads together to think up a new model of education in the aftermath of the pandemic, to undertake a true transformation of the educational systems. We agree in this need, and this is something that our administration has taken on as a goal. We have to have a long-term view while addressing immediate needs. We want to get our educational systems fully up and running again. Now the state has its part to play through making available budgets, making sure that educational services are delivered, better physical facilities, bringing technology into the classroom, bringing teachers up to speed on the use of technology in education. These are gaps that were that resulted from our own economic and educational models, but that the pandemic made more evident. We have to repair together our systems with the joint effort of civil society, states, to come up with a comprehensive response to reactivate our education. We have a 5-pillar policy that started in April with the support of universities. rolling out and implementing new programs, enhancing the skills of teachers, finding ways to care for students' mental health, and also suicide prevention. We understand that for there to be developments in society, computer science and information knowledge on computer systems is very important, so we've included that in the school curriculum. And this is something that has not been made available for different reasons in school. The fourth pillar has to do with teaching digital skills, connectivity. There are some areas that we call the dark areas, or the poorly lit areas, which is a metaphor to refer to people who don't have, regions that don't have access to the internet. We have some modular solutions that we need to integrate. We've bolstered our budget of late. We have a lot of work ahead of us. First, students have to go to school. We have a low attendance rate, unfortunately. We have to make school something students appreciate. A detailed report has to be issued by each school about attendance, so we can get a handle on this low attendance. We have to protect our students with good equipment, with good infrastructure, especially in those far-flung, isolated areas. We want to make sure that students go to school every day, and that the school they go to is a good school. And once a student actually is in school, he or she needs to receive quality education. That it be an opportunity for them to learn. We have to have innovative focuses, or approaches rather. This also has to do with our teachers' skills. We have to help teaching become an activity that is valued and appreciated in society, and to give them the support they need. We have to trust in our teachers and empower them. To conclude, the proposal of the Inter-American Agenda on Education in the aftermath of the pandemic is very much in line with what we have been pushing for and implementing in our administration to create a protective educational environment. We know that students can't learn when conditions aren't appropriate. Education is a right that needs to be guaranteed, that they be brought into back into the fold of education, that they be provided with quality education, to create to prepare them for a new labor environment, given all the changes that have been taking place in the labor market in the world. That's why we are committed to undertaking these changes and following through on some of the mandates of prior administration as well. We want to do this in a consistent, coherent way, in keeping with the modern context. We need to reactivate our educational system as a part of this overall reform process to transform our future. So the Inter-American Agenda of Education is going to enable us to share experiences, and for the sector to come up with policies that don't compete among countries, but that work together. A warm hug to all of my fellow ministers, ladies and gentlemen, ministers throughout the region. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. We give the floor to the Minister of El Salvador, Jose Mauricio Pineda Rodriguez. You have the floor, sir. Good morning. Minister of Education of Argentina and Chair of the Inter-American Committee on Education, Minister Jaime Perisic, Minister Maria Brown Perez, Minister of Education of Ecuador and Vice Chair of the Inter-American Committee on Education, Ms. Kim Osborne, Executive Secretary for the Integral Development of the OAS, ministers, colleagues with us at this 11th Inter-American meeting of Ministers of Education. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor for me to represent my country in this opportunity for political dialogue at this Inter-American meeting of ministers focused on updating the agenda for us to attack one of the biggest challenges that we have worldwide with I referred to guaranteeing through education the current and future generations, ensuring that they will have the skills to face national, local, international challenges in a very complex at a complex moment, which we are coming out of what was a complete shutdown of education. So we need to overcome now situations that call for immediate responses, strategies that arise at a time of crisis to design and implement educational policies that are rooted in our country's realities, and also to arrive at a consensus with fellow countries, not just strengthening schools and to ensure educational future, but to transform education entirely, to enable them to effectively and efficiently address the needs and desires of our peoples with a focus on political, economic, social development, as well as meeting the interests of young people. I would like to pause here and mention that how our students in our educational system throughout the world, how they learn has changed. And our challenge then is to change the way we teach. That's why venues such as this are essential for us to build regional agendas of cooperation among countries and to establish mechanisms for all of us to walk together, especially in those countries facing greater disadvantages, so that we can close the gaps in learning and teaching and do so with confidence and a steady hand, to adopt common solutions to common problems and to assess the results and to avail ourselves of the special talents that each country here has, avail ourselves of their experiences, and higher education and research will also enable us to make better decisions in keeping with the problems that we as countries face. Traditional education has no place in current times. We face unprecedented challenges. We can't tackle the current crisis with archaic systems of education. So we have to start with the concept of school and think of schools as an integral part of communities, for the community, a part of the community. Students, teachers, and the community, families, parents, all have to come together so we can devise the best systems possible. We need to update our curriculum. We have a practical guideline, to come up with a practical guideline for learning and to professionalize teachers, to endow them with the tools that they need. We will make available top quality resources to students for them to have real and effective access to the learning experiences they need, giving them the best physical facilities and healthy conditions for them so that they can fully and holistically develop themselves. This cannot be done by turning our backs to the tragic episode that was the pandemic, because we first have to tackle the learning crisis resulting from the pandemic, given the abrupt shutdown of schools. We have to move quickly toward new models of education. We need to learn from all of the learning that took place throughout the pandemic, and that needs to become part of the pillars of the whole educational community. For El Salvador, the crises stemming from COVID-19 became an accelerator of educational transformation, and to make sure that we continue to learn and to reinvest in the Ministry of Education needs to reinvest in the different territories. One of the things we've seen is that teachers now are willing to be a part of change and to step out of their comfort zone. As McKinsey would say, education only goes as far as our teachers go, and we in El Salvador do have committed teachers who are committed and involved in the transformation of the educational system. It's also true that to transform the educational system, we have to galvanize all the state institutions. We have to seriously tackle interagency, interinstitutional collaboration, so we can bring all of the institutions' resources to bear in this process, because that will strengthen us best. I'm pleased to say that my country has waged on education. We have stepped up our public investments in education, going from 1.3% to over 5% of the GDP, and this will be done in a sustainable way to broaden, or that budget will even grow next year to achieve the educational goals we have set for ourselves. This decision by President Bukele has made it possible for us to lay the foundation on which we can build a new type of education that truly meets our national values and needs. If we don't invest in education, if we don't invest well, we're not going to be able to tackle challenges. We also need to strengthen our technical ability, and we have been doing so. We want it to become self-sustainable vis-a-vis the change we face. We can produce educational material of top-notch quality, generating new pedagogical experiences for students, which enable them to use different platforms, digital platforms. On the will be a sustainable effort. Technological equipment has been made available to teachers, and this at elementary school right up through middle school, to improve connectivity in schools, and the package of connectivity for each student enables us, or them rather, to have access to this educational platform. And so this has become a tool broadening the educational experience of students beyond the classroom.
Materiales educativos específicos para ser utilizados en estos equipos tecnológicos es una de las herramientas que
This is one of the tools that we can share with everyone. In our view, at this point in the 21st century, it's a right for everyone to have access to use of technology, and with a pedagogic perspective that we're trying to build together for the entire community. We're trying to improve the quality of the use thereof and learning on it. This last aspect is pedagogical. Together with the sustainability of the program are the major challenges that required a policy of partnerships and revisiting results and progressive investment, and never lose sight of the entire that education policy should include universality and a rights-based approach focused on children. We should also generate evidence to rethink and reconfigure on an ongoing basis so that it can rise to the challenges that crop up. We entered into into an agreement with Google to train all the teachers of the public sector and as well as in both public and private sectors. Since the beginning of this, we have a basis now so that virtual education works and becomes a tool that can empower children and teachers. And so we're trying to create positive social links. So now we have a safe, violence-free school now by doing this. There's no more invasion of the digital environment. The pandemic has showed us how we have to deal with emergencies, and President Bukele has declared that it's important to step up the pace of improvement of technological infrastructure in the service of citizens that makes us committed to not only connectivity, but also a transformation of national curriculum and teaching practices and education throughout our territory. Curricular transformation that we're undergoing right now implies providing solutions to education and enables us to tweak education so that we can have both online, virtual, and in-person education work for everyone, and also in response to any emergencies that crop up. We're not only focused on content, but also on discipline. It's key to go back to the development of skills and competencies, but also we have to strengthen not only administration, but physical health of the entire education community. This is a crucial time to change educational models and also teaching models. This is achieved by getting into the schools and working with families and teachers and with the principals of schools so that they can reorganize school life and putting learning at the center of childhood. But this can't be done blindly. So we're trying to particularly focus on an evaluation model so it becomes a tool to improve learning. And so we're having middle school be conducted to 100% online with a curriculum that includes redefining teacher training and with special emphasis on the development of digital competencies and skills. And that also includes digital citizenship and the ability to get along in an over-informed society. We're transforming El Salvador so that children and adolescents can benefit from their right to education from the time they're born, to ensure learning until they realize their full potential. It's a historic debt to our country and children. Education, as established in the Constitution and the law of the country recently approved, growing up together should provide for full exercise of human rights, gender equity, inclusion, and of disability, and respect for peace, cultural identity, solidarity, and shared responsibility of the family and protection of the environment. To reforming the education system is a mission that prior governments did not fulfill because they weren't really committed to it. On the contrary, they just pilfered resources that could have done something, and they did not attach importance to anything. But we cannot make the same mistakes now. The Salvadoran population deserves that its dream to come true of a better future, and therefore the president of the program launched a program, a commitment that identifies that contributes to the training of new generations and education and guarantees education reform at every level of schools. This will transform our country from the bottom up. Once this program is launched, there will be access to a new era of education and equality for everyone. This reform will contribute to the transformation into a new era of education where there'll be quality technology, worthy infrastructure, which will include health and universal access and quality. And this cannot be achieved if we're not capable of being committed fully to the education of the youth. In politicians, businessmen, mothers, fathers, teachers, everyone has to be involved. So everyone has to give their best and do their best to improve learning, and this is for specifically the children, even vis-a-vis adverse situations such as the pandemic. Our goal is that children be happy in classrooms and that their learning be meaningful. As a country, we hail this approach, and we are rethinking our education reform using a model without losing sight of our debt, our structural debt, and our history. We must turn towards our reality. We have to create resilient education system that flexibly respond to emergencies and help to continue to advance in the development. And I'd like to greet you fraternally and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much, Minister. Now we give the floor to the Secretary of Education, U.S. Secretary of Education of the United States of America, Mr. Miguel Cardona. You have the floor, Mr. Cardona.
Ministro, ¿podría pedir la palabra?
Secretary Cardona, could you request the floor at this time? Please request the floor.
Muchas gracias. I'm honored to share the stage with my distinguished ministerial colleagues today and to address this assembly of leaders and champions for education. And a special thank you to our gracious host, Argentina, for convening this meeting. Speaking to you today, I'm reminded of one of my favorite sayings in Spanish: En la unión está la fuerza. In unity, there is strength. All of us here at OAS come from different backgrounds, representing different countries, sometimes with very different priorities. But today, we are united by our resolve to give our children the brighter future they deserve. Hoy estamos unidos por nuestra determinación de darle a nuestros hijos un futuro.
We are united to try to give a better future to our children.
We are united by the recognition that every young person has potential, and our societies are better when they have pathways to fully realize that potential. We are united by the belief that education can change lives and transform societies for the better. And as the title of this session attests, we are united by the recognition that it's systems, not superheroes, that make a lasting difference in education. Now is a moment of truth for education, and it's up to us to recognize the urgency we face to reimagine education systems to become more resilient, more equitable, and more sustainable. So today I want to update you on how we see the state of our education system in the United States, where we see common ground with all of you through the region, and areas I hope we can intentionally collaborate to build better education systems for the good of all of our countries. So first, the state of education in the United States. Here I'd like to draw a metaphor I often use here in the United States. After the pandemic, education was a flor pálida, a flower wilting under a storm like no other. Nuestro sistema de educación era una flor pálida. Como dice la canción del boricua Mark.
It was the flower. Our system was withered.
And a recent assessment that we called the Nation's Report Card shows the devastating impact that the pandemic had on our country. By most indicators, students' math and reading achievement, as measured by this one assessment, have declined several points since before the pandemic. They also tell us that gaps in achievement between some students and others worsened at the elementary level. Una flor pálida. But we must also have to be clear that even before the storm, not every flower bloomed under the same conditions. Some thrived in the sunlight, others struggled in the dark shade and in the rocky soil. Some were given lots of pathways to grow. Others were expected to push through a narrow crack in the sidewalk, if anyone expected them to grow at all. So when the storm hit, the flowers that were already the most vulnerable were hit the hardest. Racial and ethnic minority groups, students with disabilities, rural and economically disadvantaged students. My point is this: even before the pandemic, the education system simply wasn't working for everyone. And it especially wasn't working for many students who look like me. And I know that though every country is different, you're probably facing similar concerns in your own education systems. In the region overall, 2.3 million children are out of primary schools and more at higher levels. A recent World Bank and UNICEF report tells us that 4 in 5 sixth graders in the region are expected to lack basic reading comprehension capacity. We recognize that this threatens to deepen inequities that existed before the pandemic, and that it is our youngest and most vulnerable students, especially those students with disabilities, who face the gravest risk to their education and their economic future, just as it is in the United States. And just as we're seeing in the United States, these aren't challenges that can be fixed with a few patchwork solutions here and there. This is why the emphasis you've put on systems is so crucial. To go back to the flor pálida metaphor, the education system is like a garden, and if the garden was disrupted for us, why build it back the way it was before? Why not seize the moment to make it better for all the flowers? You see, we together are the master gardeners that must provide the nutrients, the care, and the attention that our wilted flowers need to recover and to thrive. Como dice la canción, aquella flor de
The sun, that flower with the petals that were sleeping has recovered it, gotten its color back because it had someone to take care of it and water it. We are the gardeners. We're the ones who take care of these flowers. In our gardens, we have to give a bit of love so that all of our flowers prosper.
Gardens. I've been inspired by the innovative approaches you undertook in response to the pandemic, and then subsequently to reopen schools and support your teachers. I look forward to continuing to learn more about your ideas and experiences. In that spirit, I want to share briefly our vision for rebuilding the garden, for reimagining our education system. At the Department of Education, we talk about raising the bar for mental health access, raising the bar for improved reading and math in our schools, raising the bar by lifting the teaching profession, raising the bar for including and supporting students with disabilities. Here's where I'd like to see us raise the bar together through international cooperation and dialogue. Let's raise the bar together. I'd like to see all students in the United States be multilingual. When I first went to school as a 5-year-old, English was my second language after Spanish. It took me years to finally recognize that being multilingual was a superpower, something that allowed me to contribute more, not less. There's so much more we can do to help multilingual students see that being multilingual is not a deficit, but an asset. And at a time when Latinos are the fastest growing population in the United States, and we already have the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, that's absolutely critical. Let's also raise the bar together for how we prepare our teachers. Let's get creative and innovative as we find ways to engage with one another to support our teachers. Whether that means embracing teachers in the United States from Latin American countries or exploring professional learning opportunities for you teachers from the United States to go teach English in your countries over the summer, let's be consequential in our collaboration. Finally, let's raise the bar for reimagining our schools together. Later this month, we will launch an initiative that reimagines our nation's high schools and how they prepare all students to thrive in their future careers. This initiative blurs the lines between high school, college, and careers. The initiative allows students to have accelerated and innovative opportunities to earn college credits and gain real-world career exposure and experiences. It's about helping our students find their passion and purpose, providing them with career-connected learning experiences that sharpen their skills, that build on their networks, and help them define their future selves. It's about our students earning post-secondary degrees and industry credentials that our employers need and our economy demands. And it's about positioning our students to pursue great jobs in their hometown and to be globally competitive in our increasingly complex and international labor market. Through this initiative, students will gain hands-on experiences in emerging innovative industries that our nation needs to build and to lead our future. In areas such as biotechnology, cybersecurity, and advanced manufacturing, and many more. Ultimately, through growing these multiple pathways to success, we're fulfilling the promise of education as a bridge for people to create the lives that they want, and we're helping our students reach their endless potential. I'm looking forward to discussing this further with all of you, and I hope to share our progress with you and exchange lessons learned as this initiative develops over the coming year, and deepen our dialogue on where we can cooperate to reimagine education in all of our countries. Let me conclude with this. I could not believe more strongly in the importance of strengthening our cooperation with the region and with OAS. I want to see us step up our engagement in the region on a foundation of mutual respect and close intentional collaboration among equal partners, always recognizing the incredible assets your countries bring to the region and to the world. And I know all of us in this administration, from President Biden to Vice President Harris on down, we are firmly committed to doing so. When we come together, we send the signal that multilateralism works, that regional collaboration works, that intentional collaboration works, and we're all better off for it. In dialogue, there's learning. In collaboration, there's progress. And in unity, there's strength. En la unión está la fuerza. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Now we give the floor to the Minister of Education of the Republic of Paraguay, Minister Ricardo Nicolás Zárate. Minister, you have the floor. Thank you. Kim Osborne, Minister of Education of Argentina and Chair of the Inter-American Committee on Education, Jaime Persic. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm joined by the Vice Minister, Ms. Sosa, who's a career official with high technical ability. It's difficult to imagine the world after the pandemic because we have so many gaps that were exposed from the pandemic, and now we have new liabilities, so we have to come up with alternatives between all of us. Some countries have very successful experiences. We may have some successful experiences, but by exchanging, the most important thing is to find the funding to do this. In the time of economic recession worldwide, we need funding to be able to improve learning. Where are we going to get the money from to use ICT in our classrooms? We just don't have the resources to be able to do this, and I think this is where there should be friendship between the nations, and we should create an actual cooperation fund, because without money, everything is just a discourse. We want to know how much we can give and use these resources among each other from this fund, where everyone can fund the best ideas to pull ourselves up from this stagnation worldwide. But the numbers could be much better, statistics. So I urge everyone to reflect and to come up with sources of funding, so these good ideas fine ideas we're sharing, we can actually put them into practice. I'd like to give Vice Minister Sosa right now the floor to talk about our transformation of education. And we began this reform before the pandemic, but now we have a roadmap laid out. So we're sharing this with everyone, and this is our national cause. And if we achieve a national consensus, we're going to try to finance it to actually put it into place, because we're coming up. A good afternoon to each and every one of you. Okay, as the minister said, the experiences we have been engaged in with in-person classes has turned into an entirely different way of teaching. So we're reimagining schools now. We're trying to recover the role of teachers in our education system. So we have to we've had to sustain distance education over time based on a guiding leadership to be able to sustain schools in different ways. There's no question that the conditions in which, with regard to access to technological resources, were quite limiting. But today we find technology in the classroom, but what we find that students at their homes don't have access, and this really constrains access to and recovery. It stands in the way of recovery, and so therefore we had to put into place conditions both in the first months by using hybrid modalities, particularly this year using online resources and also printed material resources. We were able to get out to 100% of students to start a process that we called revitalization teaching, and this goes out to 2024. So with each cohort, we're trying to create specific programs based on curricula that will enable us to even out learning among all cohorts and move forward based on the capacity of each cohort. How do we work in the schools with the different stakeholders to try to think about the support that we have to provide to teachers so that they're not alone in the classroom? But this is very linked to organizing our schools and different factors of education. And so we try to mobilize all local stakeholders using a construct called pedagogical models or leaders. And we have these at the different schools, and they work on a project that has collaboration from first grade all the way to the end of secondary education. We focus on a first stage where language and mathematics are core, but with an emphasis in having two different shifts of school to be able to, because we find it's been insufficient thus now the time that the schools are used. So we want to ensure that these two shifts, double shifts, can be used with students as they make progress in each one of the areas. And this has been quite interesting, and it includes an assessment process throughout the country. And thus, in this vein, we've had very important experiences. And in the post-pandemic era, we have noted a crisis because practices in the schools are complex, but at this point in the school year, in this second semester, the educational officials are quite empowered now with this strategy, and we are now assessing what has to be done to tweak this first year of implementation so that in the following year it will work better, as well as what we mentioned about the compensatory policy to reduce school dropout rates, not only in just generally speaking, school dropout rates in sectors such as rural areas, it's very high over the last 6 years. From 6th to 12th grade, they're heavily affected by socioeconomic conditions in a family. So there's quite a lot of dropout students in those grades. So the use of digital content beyond difficulties of access in schools or in homes, but even with support from the family with the cell phones, this is a practice that has helped us to sustain teaching processes and ensure permanence of our children remaining in school. With regard to other strategies, we've had school days have been extended, but in addition to other aspects, as well as greater time spent in school, but this has made it possible for a significant set of students to continue with projects after school, provide opportunities for them when they are at risk, and that way they can remain at school after the normal school hours. And so with support of teachers, not only as tutors, but also with ongoing training on other aspects and discipline, as well as health, as socio-emotional support, because in school we have seen the effects, and not only of the health crisis, but other complexities that have reared their ugly head in this period. For example, after the lockdown, and it's had effects. It has to have social effects as well as economic effects that has a direct impact on students. In our proposal in this regard, it's important to mention that administrative aspects, the administrative side, that also have complexities to them. So we've made important changes that allow us to focus on teaching for the teachers and for administrative activities to be done online through much more streamlined processes. This has made it possible for us for these hours of class be focused on pedagogic activities and to not take away from teacher. And in the region, and we've effectively used time by our principals and students.
So we've done our best to sustain these efforts for teachers and students. And we have a roadmap with new substantive policies. And we have a plan so that by 2040, we will have produced a comprehensive, holistic proposal enabling us to improve learning results. Now, this is a big debate. That's going to require ongoing funding. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for that presentation. We thank all 4 countries who shared their experiences, their positions, their traditions and challenges, what they're doing, and the difficulties each faces. Now, the 4 presentations, usually when we all come together, we express the importance of cooperation, collaboration, to build among all of us. We all speak of what we have in common. We all express the differences we have, our avocation and desire to work together to overcome the problems of inequality and exclusion, so that we can develop the region, have education in line with the workplace, to face the challenges that we currently face in education. I thank you all for your presentations and the challenge of working together. After having heard this open dialogue, after having heard these presentations, we're going to have an open dialogue. I don't know if there are any delegations that would like to take the floor right now to ask any questions, affirm, remark before our break. The ambassador from Colombia, Mr. Chairman. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A warm greeting to you, to all of the ministers and high authorities on education. We join all of the words of welcome and greetings that everyone has issued. I greet all of the authorities of the Inter-American Committee on Education, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Minister of Education, Alejandro Gaviria, who could not be here because he is heading up the national educational effort, and this is the most important undertaking in our country to define public policy for education over the next 4 years. Delegates, in this meeting, Colombia would like to underscore, and it has already done so, or rather the Minister of Ecuador has done so, we underscore the importance of the hemispheric declaration of toward building a new pact of education in the context of change to create resilient educational systems and to advance our intersectoral approach. Now, this is rooted, among other things, in the challenges brought by the pandemic for educational systems, and everyone who has spoken has also stated as much. This is all tied to teaching and learning that underwent unprecedented changes to consolidate projects that are in keeping with people's needs and the reality of the context they live in. That's why it's important to raise here, as have done those who have spoken, the proposal of the 3 R's, the post-pandemic R's: recovery, repair, and reactivation of the educational sector proposals, which bring together research, development, socio-emotional aspects, well-being, and getting along a coexistence with equity, and that it all be sustainable. This leads us toward consolidating mechanisms to tackle changing environments and contingencies, for us to have a resilient educational system focused on the idea of school being the driver of the productive social economic transformation. Now, the Inter-American Plan 2022-2027, reason for which we are here, the dialogue that we engage in and the agreements that we reach, shall become an unprecedented opportunity for us to strengthen innovations in education in this changing context, and will enable us to work together to come up with consensuses in education that place students as subjects of the focus of rights, the right to education. Our development plan 2002 to 22 to 26 in our country focuses its effort on the right to quality education that meets the premises of the premise of total peace, to which our president is committed to, social, environmental justice. Ministers to be a part of this dialogue enables us to identify trends in education and to set priorities for it, and to reiterate the country's commitments to devise policies and strategies that would have a positive impact on education. The OAS, in the first phase of the Inter-American agenda, opened up opportunities for analysis, participation in education. As Secretary General Almagro said, Colombia joined this effort by creating or promoting healthy lifestyles, technical standards to ensure inclusive facilities rurally and in the urban setting, and to roll out policies as well to give special care to persons with disabilities. That's way we find in what we're doing here an ally for us to broaden our understanding of what the challenges, how challenges in education are being dealt with in other countries. So we are eager to continue taking part actively in building this hemispheric educational pact to be dealt with in the second half of this meeting. And so my country, through the Ministry of Education, has expressed its intention to take on the chairmanship of Working Group 1 on systemic focus to build resilient educational systems. Mr. Chairman, I conclude my remarks by saying how certain Colombia is that this ministerial meeting is an opportunity for us to forge ahead in laying milestones which will truly be historic toward ensuring quality education for children as a right, as well as for adults. And that's something that makes us very happy. And to have heard the proposals here, especially what the U.S. Secretary of Education has said about the exchange of teaching material for ensuring that we have educational material in a number of languages. Thank you, Ambassador. The representative of Mexico has requested the floor. The representative of Mexico has the floor. Your microphone, please. The microphone is still muted.
Mike.
Tiene la palabra.
The delegation of Panama has the floor while we await Mexico's reconnection. Panama, please. I would just like to confirm if you can hear me all right. Thank you. On behalf of the Minister of Education, Ms. De Logos, a warm welcome for everyone here, and she apologizes for not being able to be here at this very important meeting of ministers. For Panama, as a country, in the beginning of 2020, the 2019, the COVID pandemic that affected us and the whole world brought about a impact that is very difficult for us to actually gauge how big it was. So we started in response to the pandemic to offer distance learning through our educational system in different modes, which enabled us to reach millions of children who were going through a very difficult situation. Now, in 2020, 2021, distance learning made it possible for us to continue offering education for children and adolescents. There is still, however, a gap to make sure that all children have equal access to education. December of 2021, a decree was issued adopting for Panama education as a national strategy, and that decree reflected the emergency and the understanding that school is the best place for children to be and to fully develop their potential. This crisis, as has already been said at this meeting, is also an opportunity for us to transform education. And as we saw, the use of technology in education and how much progress that made, we still had to come up with a recovery program to avoid school dropout. At the UN summit, in which school countries were brought together to strive toward the achievement of Objective 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals, Panama joined that effort. And in this consultation process, it was recognized that the 2016 Dialogue on Education and the 2021 Pact Dialogues on Education were very important. This important step that Panama has made, now that we are focusing on education, seeks to address together in collaboration with key actors in education to issue recommendations that would optimize the new digital transformation law in Panama, adopted in April of 2022. Panama, according to official statistics, students, 63% of our students have access to internet. That means that part of the population is a digital native. However, just a little bit under a half isn't. That's why the national government, through our ministry, has laid forth general guidelines through a law to bring about a digital transformation. And this has a key objectives: to implement digital transformation in education, to adopt an educational system that endows schools with the necessary equipment to do this, and to consolidate progress that has already have been made through the pandemic, given that these new hybrid models of education have been adopted using radio and television and other technologies, and to endow teachers with the necessary tools to update our curriculum insofar as digital wherewithal and knowledge is concerned. All of these different aspects are in response to a demand that society has made and what this law seeks to do is to ensure schools be inclusive, equitable, fair, that the learning for students be meaningful, offering students life skills and preparing them for the workplace, and to endow them with the necessary skills to acquire the necessary skills and digital literacy. And for this, there be necessary budgets allocated to implement these new policies. The national government is committed to adopting this strategy, to implement this law, and to learn from other countries in the region who've been successful, so that Panama can learn from those experiences and bolster our own approach. And that's why it's important for us to be part of this regional effort. Thank you. Thank you, Representative of Panama. Let's see if the representative of Mexico is back. Madam Representative of Mexico. Good afternoon. Can you hear me now? Yes, very well. I'm happy that now I can speak, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Secretary of Education of Mexico, we greet the Executive Secretary of Integral Development of the OAS, Ms. Kim Osborne, and Minister of Education of Argentina, Jaime Persic, and President of the Inter-American Committee on Education, CIE, of the OAS, as well as we greet all of the ministers, vice ministers in attendance, and all of the members of the delegations. We are grateful for the invitation, opportunity to take part in the 11th Inter-American meeting of Ministers of Education of the OAS, which offers the high educational authorities the opportunity to exchange policies, strategies, ideas with which to strengthen our educational systems, as well as to create opportunities and to ensure a quality education and continuity of education for all of our students. Since 2018, the government of Mexico underscores the new educational model, new schools in Mexico, which seeks to make sure that people are trained in interculturality, inclusion, democracy, that highlights the identity of the nation, and that expresses that we are a plural, cultural, and plurilingual country. Leticia Ramirez Amaya, Minister of Education, says that it's very important for us to build partnerships and cooperation on topics that we share, that are important to us, to transform our education, our country through education. That's why from this Secretariat, we appreciate this opportunity to speak at this, to take part in this Inter-American Committee on Education meeting, for us to seek a resilient education system and to address initiatives that have to do with the 3 Rs in the post-pandemic: digital education as well, in a changing context. I would also like to share with you actions we have adopted in Mexico, which are tied to the purpose of this forum, which is developing resilient educational systems. The first being a return to the classroom, in-person class. In 2022-2023, in-person classes were open. 24 million students and 1.9 educational workers in 200,000 schools return to the classroom, in which we started a new cycle and outlook of education to overcome, that is to strengthen our curriculum, to prepare new plans and programs, study programs with the support of the federal, state, and local governments. The proper health protocols are adhered to, and health committees also take part in ensuring the safety of schools. Two, the strategy to achieve this goal and to eradicate school dropout. In this school year, this strategy was implemented to address dropout, to diagnose learning that took place during the pandemic, and to address the socio-emotional effect that the pandemic had on students in school, especially the most disfavored or underprivileged who missed out on school. Other projects and plans that are tied to a diagnosis and evaluation that was carried out in September and that will be applied in February, the results of which will be applied abilities or life skills and socio-emotional care, methodologies and resources to recover lost knowledge and mechanisms to ensure students come back to school, stay in school, and to bolster teacher skills in the secondary school system, and to foster healthy lifestyles in children and adolescents. So over the last decades, children, that is, the social determinants of health were not addressed in children, and that affected them negatively, and there was a differentiated, segmented care offered. That's why the new preschool educational plan and for primary and secondary school recognize the importance of health, mental and physical. Sound seems to have been lost, says the interpreter.
México, disculpe, tenemos problemas con su audio. ¿Podría?
Can you hear us, Mexico? I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Well, now we do hear you. Thank you very much. Please proceed. Now, the core curriculum covers 7 cross-cutting areas representing a coming together of teachers and knowledge of daily lives of life skills and life knowledge that students need. Through this cross-cutting healthy life pillar based on learning methodologies that are project-based and tying school to community, guidance and tools will be offered for students to slowly change their habits for the National Initial Education Plan, initial education, early education, which is viewed as a support for working mother, this based on labor rights. And that wasn't really rooted in students' needs, and that led to fragmented and unequal education being offered students. That's why this year the National Education Early Education Policy was adopted, recognizing this early education as a right for children under 3 years of age and a essential component of basic education. 5, continuity of services offered before the pandemic. When high school services were made available online, 500,000 students were offered this model of online high school teaching. 100% online enables students over 15 years of age who have concluded their secondary schooling to develop technological skills so that they can work these skills into their daily lives. This is an educational option that's made available by the Secretary of Education, and so those who take part in it do receive an electronic certificate and recognition with which they have access to higher education at any public or private institution throughout the country. 6, improvements in open and distance education. In June of 2022, there was a day devoted to open and distance education by the Secretary of Education, in which civil servants worked to enhance educational services, remote and distance learning, so that those students, millions of which who were not able to attend in person, can conclude their studies. During that event, distance learning was deemed to be a very important means for persons with disabilities or who have work responsibilities who were not able to go to school. Since education is made available at a distance, that millions of students could continue their education. So I thank you for this opportunity to share with you the experiences of the Secretary of Public Education in Mexico, and for us also to learn about the different actions undertaken by the Ministries of Education of the member countries within the context of a systemic look at building resilient systems to favor our students. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Después de haber tenido este diálogo abierto y constructivo entre los distintos representantes,
open and constructive dialogue between the ministers of education of the region, I propose that we agree that the committee, with the support of the technical secretariat, will take note of these exchanges, important exchanges, and to incorporate them in the work plan for 2023. If there's no objection, it is hereby said.
Bahamas tiene la palabra, entonces.
Bahamas is recognized, therefore.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share what the Bahamas has been doing as a result of the interruption in face-to-face education for our students. We recognize that there is a learning gap, and what we have done, we have commissioned a company to offer diagnostic assessment of all of our students in literacy and in numeracy, so that we are given sufficient data to now produce intervention strategies for these students. Additionally, we have expanded our virtual instructional school so that all of our students throughout the archipelago are able to have an ongoing access to education, even though there might be some interruptions, natural or otherwise. As you would know, we are just coming through the Hurricane Nicole, and while we had to shut down school in brick and mortar, the instructional program still continued. We also made available to students during the summers, we had what we call an extended learning academy, where for 4 weeks our students who were identified by their teachers who needed extensive intervention, they were able to get that one-on-one intervention for their educational needs. We also look at the training and retraining of teachers, because this digital age requires that our teachers need to be aware of any changes in education instruction. And so there's ongoing professional development for our teachers. Additionally, we have extended our partnerships, public-private partnerships, so that our corporate sponsors are able to provide the much needed devices for our students, not only devices, but Wi-Fi connectivity, etc. We work very closely with the providers of our telecoms companies, and they are working with us to provide Wi-Fi connectivity, fiber optic connectivity for all of our schools throughout the archipelago. So these are some of the things that the Bahamas is doing, and certainly we wish to congratulate the OAS for affording countries in the region to share what they have been doing, to share some of the challenges that we are facing. And also, I think all of us have some very, very similar challenges. Funding is one of those challenges. And so we are seeking many, many opportunities for increasing funding that will allow us to provide ongoing education for our students. We have a saying here in the Bahamas, education always, because we know the importance of the continuation of education for all of our students, despite any challenges which we may encounter. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and I look forward to continued dialogue and collaboration with our regional partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bahamas. Now, no more requests for the floor. I repeat, their agreement to instruct the Technical Secretariat of the Inter-American Committee to take note of this dialogue, all the proposals and positions that have been put forward by the countries here at this meeting. And if you're in agreement, we'll take a break now for lunch, and we will come back at the scheduled time with our I need to go to our cabinet meeting, but our vice minister and our secretaries will continue at this important meeting. Thank you very much, and see you later.